So you might be wondering, what do I really need in order to get started loom knitting? Of course, you'll need a loom tool. This is the KB Ultimate Oval Loom. It is part of a 2-loom set. This is the larger of the 2 looms. I actually like the smaller one really well, but either one works for a beginner project. You'll need some yarn, of course. This is a number 4 medium weight yarn. That information is found on the package. You'll need a loom tool. One comes with the set, but I prefer this KB ergonomic hook instead. It has a nice cushy grip handle. It's easy to hang on to, and it provides a lot less hand fatigue, so I prefer that one to the ones that usually come for free with a loom kit. You'll need a pair of scissors, and then I highly recommend a tensioner. You can buy a tensioner. They're kind of difficult to find in most stores. That's why a lot of people resort to like a homemade version. This is just an ink pen, an old Office Depot ink pen. I've removed the end of the pen and taken the guts out of the inside, and this makes an excellent tensioner. I can actually leave this narrow tip on here. It's removable as well, but I can leave it on here if I'm working with a medium weight or a fine yarn. I may have to pull that off if the yarn is super fat because it won't thread through the little hole in the end. If you don't have a pen, you could even use something like a McDonald's straw. You just want to cut it into about 4-inch sections so that it's easy to hold on to and it's not so flexible. So I'm going to show you how to get started by tying a slip knot, and then we'll learn how to cast on to the loom. And cast on means simply to attach your yarn to the loom so that you can get started with your project. So you're going to thread the yarn into the end of your tensioner, whichever kind you're using. And then if you're using something like an ink pen or even a straw or commercially available tensioner, you might need to suck on the end to get the yarn to come all the way through. When the yarn gets to the end, you'll just want to pull it out, and then we're going to make a slip knot. So I'm going to pull out a long piece of yarn here to show you how to do that. I'm going to lay down my yarn. This is my tail, and I'm going to make a Jesus fish. And the working yarn is on top. That's the part, that just means the part of the yarn that's attached to the ball. So again, I just laid my yarn down and made a little Jesus fish. Now, if you have a different method for making a slip knot that you know about, go ahead and use your method. It's really not that important how you create the slip knot. You just need a nice slip knot. So you've got your Jesus fish here. Now you want to take your working yarn, and again, that's the part that's attached to the ball, and just pinch up a little piece. And I'm just pinching together 2 pieces to make a little loop. And what I'm going to do is pick up the side of my fish. I'm going to shove that little loop into the center. Now I'm going to grab that with my hand. And now I need to grab 2 things. I need to grab my working yarn and that tail. And I'm just going to hold on to them while I pull this loop to create my slip knot. Now it's called a slip knot because I can adjust the size of this loop simply by pulling on my working yarn. And I don't have to pull very hard. It just slips really easily, and I can make that knot any size that I want it. And I want it to be, about the size of a quarter right now. So I have a tail, I have my slip knot, I have my tensioner attached to my working yarn, and I'm ready to get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my ball of yarn with my tensioner outside of my oval, and I've positioned my oval so that it's long ways and it's facing towards my body. I find that easiest to work with. And my slip knot with my tail is inside of my oval. And now I'm just going to lay my working yarn between any 2 pegs. And in this case, I'm going to show you how to cast on 10 pegs. How many pegs will you need to cast on for your project? Well, that depends on how wide your piece needs to be. In this case, we're just practicing, so I'm just going to cast on 10 pegs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my working yarn, that's the part that's attached to the ball, and I'm going to wrap it around just 1 peg. So you can see there, it's just wrapped around 1 peg. And I'm going to take my working yarn, which I have in my hand over here, and I'm just going to shove it through that slip knot. Now, tightening it around the very first peg is probably the trickiest part of this cast on. You only have to do it one time. It's just one peg, but this seems to be the part that people find the most difficult. I'm still holding on to that new loop that I created by shoving my working yarn through that slip knot. So let's show you again. I've got it wrapped, my working yarn wrapped around one peg, and I'm just going to shove it through that slip knot. I'm still holding on to that. Now I'm going to take my tail over here, and I'm just going to pull on my tail, just the tail here, until I get it nice and tight around that one peg. You'll see it's nice and tight around just one peg. I have a long tail here, and I still have my slip knot. Now my slip knot is too long again, and you're going to find that we're going to seesaw back and forth, and I'm just going to pull on this working yarn to make that tail shorter again. So from now on, I don't need to worry about this tail. So I'm going to actually take that tail, and just to get it out of the way, I'm just sticking it underneath the loom just to get it out of the way. So I've got it wrapped nice and tight around one peg, and for all of the other pegs, I'm just going to take my working yarn and wrap it around the very next peg. I'm going to put it through the center of that yarn, or that loop, and then I'm just going to pull on the new loop that I created. Again, I'm going to shorten. I'm going to take the working yarn, I'm going to wrap it around one more peg. I'm going to put it through the center of that loop, and I'm going to pull on the new loop that I created. I'm going to take the working yarn, I'm going to wrap it around one peg, just this peg right here. I'm going to put the yarn through the center of the loop and pull on the new loop that I created. And you do want the loops to be fairly tight around the pegs. So again, through the loop, pull on my new loop and tighten. Now I have a really big loop there, so I'm going to want to pull on my working yarn to make it smaller again. And you'll see what I mean about seesawing back and forth, making this loop smaller, and then it gets bigger again and smaller. And I'm just going to keep repeating this process. Let me see. I'm going to keep repeating this process until I have 9 pegs cast on. Remember I said I wanted 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to do number 8, number 9, and now I have a big loop again. Oops. And let's count those one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to make my loop small. I'm going to put that loop over the last peg, and I'm going to pull on my working yarn, and I have cast on 10 pegs. Now, when you look at the outside of your loom, you'll see that there's a little channel in each peg where your little loom tool can rest. You'll have one loop of thread around each of the 10 pegs. But if you turn your loom over to the inside, you'll see that there is actually no channel, but there are 2 loops of thread around each peg on the inside. You'll know you've done your cast on correctly if your 2 loops are on the inside, 1 loop is on the outside. And your tail there, we'll worry about that later on in the project. We don't even need to worry about that anymore. So I want you to practice this skill several times today. I want you to take your loom, lay it down on a comfortable surface like your kitchen table, and practice casting on several times. This is a thing that you only do one time for each project, but it's an important part of the process. And just like when you learn anything else, it feels very strange at first, but I promise you that if you practice this skill, you'll become very comfortable with it. If you have any questions, you always know how to contact me, and I hope that you have a chance this evening to practice this skill and to become more comfortable with it. I'll come back soon and I'll teach you the 2 stitches that you'll need to know in order to start your project. That's the knit stitch and the purl stitch. But first, I want you to practice casting on 10 stitches on your loom.